of the depths of the hatred our success and our freedom can engender in our adversaries. You know, the lengths to which they are willing to go to try and undermine what we hold most dear. Now, I'm of course using the first person plural, the we, to describe who and what it was that was attacked on 9/11. But while I believe it was every value the West takes as foundational that was attacked, there is no getting around the fact that the attack was launched at the United States and at the symbols of its political, economic, and military power in the White House, the Pentagon, and the World Trade Center, respectively. Yet, make no mistake about it, what terror sought to block out or to blot out on September 11th was perhaps centrally what America means to millions of people who are not Americans. If, as I believe is the case, America symbolizes the yearnings of billions of people to be free, then all of us, and not just Americans, have a duty to stand up and say that what America represents and what was attacked on that day shall never be defeated. And it can only be defeated by the indifference and the complacency of those for whom freedom matters. The America that so many of us have come to know and love and admire is not the official Washington or Wall Street. It is the idea that animates American life and the character that that idea has imbued in the American people. That idea is that freedom matters more than anything. America is a place where people, no matter what their circumstances, no matter what their origins or social class, no matter what their mother tongue, can deploy their own energies in an attempt to become what they want to be. It is no accident that citizens of scores of nations were killed in the attack on the World Trade Center. America is a beacon for those who want to be their own masters, who dream of doing what they want. America is so feared by the world's zealots and ayatollahs because it constantly reminds people that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is an ideal deeply rooted in a powerful nation and will never release its grip on the human imagination. Now, I underline the extent to which 9/11 was aimed at something that transcends America and touches us all, in case people want to bury their heads in the sand and pretend that what happened 13 years ago was aimed exclusively at the United States. And the rest of us who share America's values will somehow get a free pass. As Clifford May reminded us recently, it was the late, lamented Christopher Hitchens who made the connection between the September 11th we are here to commemorate and another September 11th, the day in the 17th century when the Muslim invasion of Europe was stopped by a stinging military defeat at the gates of Vienna. This connection matters because it underlines once again the error that it too often is made, including by the Reverend Jeremiah Wrights of the world, that on September 11th, America's chickens came home to roost. As you quickly realize, if you actually read the list of complaints of Osama bin Laden and his co-conspirators, their problem was not with, say, American foreign policy. America was targeted because of what it symbolizes in a centuries-long struggle with Islam for dominance in the world. Their grievances did not focus on recent American policy or its support of Israel, for example. It focused on things like the loss of Andalusia at the end of the 15th century, when the Moors were driven out. It focused, too, on the collaborationist betrayals of much of the modern Muslim leadership, as when Saudi Arabia allowed infidel American soldiers to be stationed on its holy soil. Understanding these origins of the Islamist attack on the West, that they are rooted in a hatred of what we represent, and even more burning hatred of the complacency and the complaisance of the modern Muslim leadership, who seek progress through accommodation with a corrupt and effete West. That lays bare one of our single greatest challenges in responding to 9/11, and that is the need for the intellectual courage to talk openly about the nature of the adversary that we face, and therefore what is necessary to defeat him. For it is clear that we face not nihilist madmen with IEDs and heavy weapons. We face religious zealots driven by a puritanical urge to purge their religion of corrupting influences and return to first principles. In achieving this understanding, we have not been aided by the craven evasions of so many of our political and opinion leaders who seem quite content to present themselves as credible authorities on what constitutes Islam. President Obama may not be the worst offender, but he's right up there on the list, and is certainly the most high profile. As Robert Fulford, one of my favorite columnists, wrote in his usual incisive manner in yesterday's National Post, and I quote, he starts by quoting Barack Obama. He says, "Now let's make two things clear." Barack Obama told the world on Wednesday, adopting a brisk schoolmaster's tone. First, ISIS, the self-professed Islamic State that has taken over large parts of Syria and Iraq, is not actually Islamic. Why would he say that, Fulford asks? Because, as Obama explained, no religion condones the killing of innocents. Since Obama is neither a Muslim nor a scholar, that judgment is, to use an Obama phrase, way above his pay grade. As Bernard Lewis, a great authority on Islam, puts it, quote, "It is surely presumptuous for those who are not Muslims to say what is orthodox and what is heretical in Islam. It is equally presumptuous for someone in Obama's position to say what is a religion and what isn't. If members of ISIS call themselves Muslims, they're Muslims. The US president is relying on the world's tolerance for politically correct claptrap, but this is going too far," end of quote. Well then, the question surely arises, if Barack Obama doesn't speak for Islam, who does? Who speaks for Islam? You might think, like Bernard Lewis, that this is a question for that faith's adherents to work out, and in normal times that would be the correct answer. But these are not normal times. The West's politicians and editorialists whom I have already referred to, of course I exclude in that our distinguished guest this evening, seem quite content to make ex-cathedra pronouncements about what true Islam is, usually characterized as a religion of peace, and those who pervert the religion for their own nefarious purposes, i.e. terrorists, such as Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Islam's adherents are always rightly pointing out that the religion is not hierarchical. There are no bishops. There is no one central authority figure with power to determine doctrine. There is no pope. There are major schisms within Islam, separating, for example, Shiites, Sunnis, Sufis, and Ismailis. The tradition tends to be one of individual clerics and mosques establishing a following for their interpretation of the Quran and local traditions. There is no one Islam, and in this it is like most major religions. The reason all this matters is that if we do not understand our adversary, the radical Islamist jihadists, we will fail to take the correct steps to protect ourselves and to defeat them. Wishful thinking is a poor defense against suicide bombers and battle-hardened guerrillas. The Islamist threat to Western societies like Europe, Canada, and the US is in reality, and I think in this I am following on ground already well plowed by Salim. The Islamist threat to the West is in reality a secondary battlefield in what is chiefly a civil war for the control of Islam. The religion of peace that our leaders so often invoke is in fact one faction in the battle for Islam's soul. And when we characterize Islam in this way, we are in fact taking sides in the civil war over how that religion is to be understood. It's right for us to do so. Who wins this battle matters not only because it can make us more or less safe, but at least as importantly because we believe that the freedom and the importance of the individual that are at the heart of the Western tradition, and that I've referred to at the beginning of my talk, are not only good for Canadians, but they're good for people everywhere. This is a universal good to which we aspire. The modernizers within Islam, with whom we ally ourselves, are the ones who want their religion to make peace with modern concepts like secularism, democracy, minority rights, equality of the sexes, freedom of conscience, and so forth. They can adduce compelling evidence of the compatibility of the Islamic canon with these ideas. But the radicals are no less able to find justification within that canon for their cruel and revanchist policies. and practices. Islam was no religion of peace when it spread itself by the sword for centuries, the tide in Europe only being turned back at the gates of Vienna. Plenty of non-believers met grisly fates in the face of that onslaught of people motivated by a vision of a divine mandate to spread the truth to every land. Both sides call down the blessings of Allah and his prophet Muhammad on their work and quote the Quran to their purpose. Islam is not the first religion to be torn asunder between embracing new concepts as the way forward versus a return to first principles. We in the West know something about such conflicts. The English Civil War pitted a purifying, puritanical interpretation of Protestantism against those who believed in the divine authority of king and church. Many died. A king lost his head over differences regarding what the Christian religion enjoined its followers to do. Calling the faction who favored true Christians and their opponents a perversion of the religion would have done nothing to help resolve the conflict, because it would have misunderstood what the adversaries thought was at stake. The civil war within Islam, of course, doesn't only rage far away somewhere. It is here. It's in Canada. Work for my institute several years ago found that Muslim public opinion strongly favored the inclusive liberal values of Canada. Yet while 65% of Canadian Muslims repudiated Al-Qaeda, for example, 35% did not. 35% Muslim Canadians did not repudiate Al-Qaeda. When the Toronto 18 terrorism suspects were arrested, an RCMP officer described them as representing, quote, a broad strata of Canadian society, and the Toronto Star, my favorite newspaper, professed to find, and I quote, no common denominator linking them, despite the fact that they were all Muslims and many attended the same mosque. Such head-in-the-sand behavior that denies the true nature of the threat we face is just as likely to turn our rights into that suicide pact to which the famous Supreme Court Justice Jackson referred in one of his seminal decisions, as the opposite illiberal and revolting reaction of extremists who, on the night following the arrests of the Toronto 18, vandalized mosques in both Rexdale and Etobicoke. In the recent case around the threatened bombing of a VIA train between